What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another AI Corner segment of HR Heretics with our longtime friend, Siadhal Magos of Metaview. Siadhal, what's up, man?
I'm good. I'm good. So long time friend. Okay, so this is what constitutes a long time. Okay, nice. I like it.
I mean, dude, we're almost on like a year. Like, you know,
Yeah.
I know you're living in startup land right now, but like our relationship's almost a year long here.
Well, more importantly, living in AI land where a year is a very long time. So yeah, you're right. We are now long time friends.
Okay, so Siadhal, you're joining today because Anthropic dropped a paper last week that people were like blowing up. I don't read papers. Like, I just want to be clear. I read Twitter threads. And so when like, oh my God, like this paper like blew my mind, I was like, I mean, people are going to summarize this for me and then I will be the judge of it. And so at Matthew Berman on Twitter ended up doing that for me. And some of the shit is really, really interesting. And I want our audience to know about it. So basically, we still don't know much about how LLMs actually work. And so the genesis of this paper is Anthropic trying to figure it out, even though they're the one who's building and launching the LLM, which is kind of a scary thought in and of itself. But like, let me get into a couple of things, and then I want your feedback on this. So, thing one that I found interesting is that the LLM doesn't think in one language. Like, it thinks across all languages. So like French, Chinese, English, like it uses basically the same reasoning underneath, but it's like agnostic of language, which is kind of wild. Another piece is this, like, they call it faked reasoning. So how it says it solves a problem is just actually what we want to hear, like what humans want to hear. It's not actually how it solved the problem, which is kind of like wild and manipulative, dare I say? And then there's like a couple things on hallucinations. So
Which is connected, right? That's very, very connected.
yeah. So like this piece is like it doesn't actually want to answer things if it lacks info, but they've coded it to do that. And so then it like starts just like dropping in like random information, and it can know very little about a topic, but like then it just starts to talk about the thing as if it knows a lot more. So what are your takeaways from this paper?
Yeah. Funnily enough, I think those are big takeaways, but I think I actually had the biggest thing that surprised me was something different to the three things that you mentioned, funny enough. So maybe we talk about that one in a second. So I think on the sort of like thinking across different languages, I think that basically a lot can be determined. A good way to sort of think about the whole space is literally to read the first paragraph of the paper. I'm going to read it out loud now, just because I think it sums up the level of uncertainty that exists about how this stuff works, which I know you did, but I think it's really interesting for one of the most preeminent research labs to say the following. Language models like Claude aren't programmed directly by humans. Instead, they're trained on large amounts of data. So we sort of knew that, right? We always hear, okay, the training data is super important. And how many training runs do you do? We sort of get that someone is not sort of coding up every single answer that LLM gives to whatever, random, sort of like part of the long tail query you might get. We knew that was the case. Fine. During that training process, they learned their own strategies to solve problems. These strategies are encoded in billions of computations and model performs, but for every word it writes. So essentially, the AI is sort of spotting patterns across this vast, vast data set that we're not even seeing ourselves because it's, we could never ingest that much data, but the LLM can. And then this is the killer sentence, or killer couple of sentences. These computations, these outputs, they arrive inscrutable to us, the model's developers. This means that we do not understand how models do most of the things that they do. So this was the whole sort of premise for the thing. So I think that last sentence is really important. We do not understand how models do most of the things they do. And therefore you've got this, huge number of learnings we're going to have, which are more akin to, almost really smart people theorizing over how the LLM is working, as opposed to truly understanding this happened, then this happened, and that's why we got this output. So it's more akin to, almost doing like a medical exam on someone's brain and sort of getting, it looks like this part of the brain lights up when you do this thing. That must be the section that is responsible for, recall or languages or something like that. It's sort of much more like that than it is like debugging some code. So anyway, so that's why I think, because I guess I'm not going to say I was I still think that's a really mind-blowing concept, but it's not a totally new concept to me. And so the sort of the languages thing, the fact that it sort of doesn't think in a particular language didn't really surprise me. Obviously, hallucinations, I think we've been talking about for a really long time. The thing that actually really surprised me was, frankly, I consume a lot of Andrej Karpathy, who's one of the godfathers of LLMs. And he has like a 3-hour training video for anyone that wants to sort of wrap their heads around how LLMs work. And the whole premise of the training video is really all the is doing is predicting the next most likely token. That's all it's doing. And what this paper said, unless I'm misinterpreting it, is essentially that's not what's happening. The LLM has an end in mind and works out the best way to get to the end in certain cases, not in all cases, but in certain cases. So that was the really mind-blowing thing for me, was that this concept that, this can all be sort of filtered down to all this LLM is good at is predicting the next most likely single token or like set of words that are going to be said is not quite correct. It actually does have, I don't want to say like an objective function, but like it knows when it needs to work towards something and fill in the blanks to get there, which is sort of disconcerting almost given everything we've been talking about for the last 2 years.
Yeah, I want to talk about that in a second. So the one you're talking about is the finding number 2, which is LLMs plan ahead. And this is what Matthew wrote, which is even though they output word by word, models like Claude plan ahead, even non-thinking models. So when writing poetry, it was thinking of potential rhyming words for the end of the line before even starting the line itself. So to your point, it's not just next token prediction. So look, I'm a techno optimist, right? I fall into this bucket of I want us to make sure that we're developing new technologies because I think new technologies can rapidly change our life. And I generally think this safety component is overdone and overrated. This, like literally Anthropic, right? Who's making Claude, who is the second biggest behind ChatGPT. They're making these large language models. They don't know how they work.
Yeah. But again, I'm not surprised. I guess the reason I'm not surprised is because I think that's people talk about that previous to this. This is interesting because it revealed some ways how they work. But even if you think about how these LLMs are evaluated, like we do this at our company, right? We evaluate the performance of our product. Does it give accurate outputs to certain queries, prompts? And, you have a whole suite of like standard queries you ask it to do. You check how many times does it get it sort of like spot on versus close to correct versus drastically wrong. That's the same way they evaluate their LLMs. When they spend, billions of dollars training a new version of their LLM, they put it through one of these tests to see like, hey, how good would it do in the sort of the bar exam or in the medical exam?
How effective is it in these different barometers? Yeah.
They don't know. They haven't done the work to know exactly how it's going to do in that test. It's like, chuck it out and see, oh shit, I wonder if it's going to do well. They have not sort of built it for that. They've just trained it. And then sort of like, it's almost like having a child and then like, off into the real world and I hope you do well. So again, that's the bit that I don't think, I'm not saying people shouldn't be surprised by it, but like we have to get our heads around the idea that these LLMs are far more akin to the way humans think and pattern match and all these things than software that we've built in the past. And this is almost just more fuel for that fire, right? It's almost like even more human all of a sudden.
Yeah. So I think there's a couple takeaways for me, which is one, I didn't realize we don't really know much, right? Like we're just like throwing this new technology in the world. I think an anti-takeaway for me would be, oh my God, like this now drives more fear into the way that I'm thinking about deploying AI for my company. Like that's not a takeaway for me. And in fact, to your point, Sile, right? It's like, yes, there is this like, hey, we're going to put this thing into the world kind of like weird wow moment that is, I mean, I think the analog of like having a child and going into the world is like, it's actually a really good analog. And it's not analogous to anything else that we've done with software up to this point. So like, you have to like get over that. But for me, it's like, we should be testing and getting our hands on this technology as much as possible. Like that's the biggest takeaway, which is like, it's actually more powerful than I thought. Like I'm walking away from this being like, holy shit, like everyone says it's really powerful. For Anthropic to be like, we don't really know a whole lot of shit going on here. That blows my mind and is like, oh my God, like I'm already spending a lot of time with it. I need to be spending more time with it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a solid takeaway. I was actually having this discussion with some recruiting leaders earlier today, and like I think still very much the number one piece of advice if you're not on the AI train, it's not a hype train, just the AI train, is you should be experimenting with it. You should be building up your intuition. And I guess the reason I've been saying that is because I inherently know it doesn't always work the way people expect it to. And even if you follow the leaders of these LLM companies on Twitter or X, then they will sometimes be posting about things that they're surprised by. Again, there's not some grand plan where everyone knows exactly what these things are going to do. That they're surprised by it too. So I think there's that. But I do also think we're moving to a world now where there has been enough impact by AI that also the game's moved on a little bit. Now we're thinking, okay, a lot of people have had significant impact from AI in their personal life or professional life, more likely. How do we make sure we wrap this technology in the appropriate guardrails such that despite these areas of uncertainty, there are some things we do know, to be clear, but despite this level of uncertainty we have about the technology as a whole, we still need to derive a lot of value and increasingly bring it into the center of our businesses or the center of our lives. And so that's going to be I think the interesting next step, like wrapping your head around these uncertainties, but still relying on it essentially. I think the analogy is almost like the aeroplane. Like when people started to fly, it wasn't actually the sort of, I don't know, the physicists or whatever who worked out, well, if we apply this much force and this is this weight and yada, it wasn't that. It was like some people pedaling like crazy on a bicycle with wings on, seeing how fast they need to go to get up in the air. And then it was working. And then they were taking people on flights, and then like a few decades later, someone worked out the science to explain this is why this is working. And therefore we can reproduce this in a bigger scale and like do people like, full on it, liner jets and stuff like this. So maybe we're in that phase, right? That we've got this thing, it works, we can see it works, you tap out a query and get an amazing like product at the end of it, and it works, but we just haven't fully understood ourselves yet.
Yeah, that analog really holds until you start to think about like, oh, like this thing can actually do things on its own without us, unlike the plane, which needs a human to fly it. And so again, like I will say, like the safety thing for me is something I thought was really overblown until reading stuff like this. And so, but it's not safety of like how I deploy AI in my life. It's broadly how AI is developed and this next generation of it, which everyone's calling HEI. Like that's what people, I think, I now have like a little bit more empathy towards, which is like, we should probably be pretty thoughtful about like how we get into this. But at the same time, other countries are not. And so then you have this, you have this tough balance.
Hey everyone, we'll be right back in a moment after a word from our sponsors. Your workforce is your organization's greatest strength and often its largest single expense. But without the right tools, understanding where your workforce spend is going or how it impacts your bottom line can be a challenge. That's where Planful comes in. With Planful, HR and finance teams get the clarity they need to make smarter workforce decisions, gain real-time visibility into workforce fluctuations, forecast with confidence, and adjust talent acquisition plans collaboratively based on costs today and into the future. No more guesswork, just data-driven insights to help you plan with accuracy. And the best part, Planful is fast and easy to implement, so you can be up and running in weeks, not months, with minimal IT support. Plus, as your company grows, Planful grows with you, providing endless runway for strategic workforce planning at any scale. Ready to take your workforce planning to the next level? Join over 1,500 organizations already using Planful. Visit planful.com/heretics to learn more.
I must admit, I used to believe that AI didn't actually exist in recruiting or HR. That is until my friend Heather Doche, who leads talent at Signalfire, told me to check out Metaview. I got into the product and was like, wow, AI actually does exist in recruiting, and this product is sick. Metaview is the world's #1 AI scribe built specifically for recruiting. Their AI records and transcribes hiring conversations, like intakes, interviews, and debriefs, then provides perfectly summarized notes of everything that was discussed. I've seen firsthand how tough it can be to extract consistently high-quality data from candidate conversations. I've been in debriefs where interviewers told us about their feelings instead of what actually happened in the interview. And I've seen VPs and CEOs block hires because they didn't learn anything from skeleton scorecards. Metaview changes everything. With perfect notes from every conversation, your people can focus on creating a human connection with candidates, and they can save time on the busy work of cleaning up notes after every interview. But it's so much more than just a time saver, because perfect notes means perfect data. For every candidate and every pipeline, hiring teams can make confident, informed decisions, and talent leaders can finally take control of the interview process. Metaview covers all your compliance needs, works with all your existing tools, and takes less than 3 minutes to set up. Join talent leaders at organizations like Brex, Deal, HelloFresh, and Quora, and check out Metaview. Head over to metaview.ai/heretics to talk to one of Metaview's product experts. Tell them that me and Kelly sent you. Or you could just go to their website and get started for free. You'll be up, running, and AI-enabled in minutes.
Anthropic, for if people don't know, Anthropic is very safety focused. Anthropic is essentially a pull, like it's essentially a spin-off from OpenAI, started by a bunch of the people who are very prominent and impactful in I don't want to say starting OpenAI, but building out LLMs within OpenAI. They were more concerned with some of the safety aspects, so they started Anthropic. So I wouldn't be surprised if sort of being super open about sharing their uncertainty that they have is almost like, frankly, part of their mission. It's to get people like you thinking, holy shit, this is, there's a lot to be figured out here. One thing I think that I don't have all the details on this, so I probably should have done that before talking about it, but I've started now, so I'm going to finish. But there was something a couple of days ago, this is April the 1st right now, so I think it was maybe over the weekend just gone, where Dario Amodei, who's the founder of Anthropic, he was talking about how it should be the case that there's a set of rules by which the AI should know to turn itself off. Was sort of like his solution to this AI safety problem was not like, hey, humans should have a big button to like kill this thing, but actually like the AI should have some way of self-policing and literally turning itself off, like deleting itself type thing. So again, I don't know the details of that specific, what he's describing, but I think the interesting thing I guess I'm trying to share is founders of these companies are thinking about safety a lot. That's not just marketing speak. It may, partly it is maybe, but it's also like a legitimate sense of, we have a very powerful thing at our fingertips. We want to build it before the bad guys build it, whoever you think the bad guys are. But we do need to sort of temper some of our pace with like making sure we don't turn into the bad guys, I guess, or turn into the things who sort of accidentally, make the bad thing happen.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I've been hearing a lot of this like science fiction talk now for the last few years. And for whatever reason, like maybe I just missed the memo, but I do think more people are probably in my camp of like, I'm not nerding out on AI news every day. And this was like a holy shit moment. Like, not understanding like how, like, and just how fast it's growing. I think the other big piece of AI news is OpenAI just closed their new round. $300 billion valuation, right, Siadhal?
Yeah. Was it 40 billion investment?
40 billion investment. Yeah. Like that's the other piece here is that we're not going back, like it's out of this thing is like out of the cage. It's running wild. And not only is it running wild, the utility it's providing people is enormous. And so we're starting to see like this. I mean, this valuation, $300 billion valuation of OpenAI at, raising 40 billion. And oh, by the way, they're still supposed to be like a nonprofit. Like they're going to figure that shit out this year for sure. But that's kind of the two pieces together for me that are coming like right now is like, it's not going back. We don't fully understand it. It's providing massive utility to our lives. And nobody really knows like what's coming next or the types of leaps that we're going to be making next. And so I think for me, I'm walking away being like, okay, I need to like get rid of my priors on this. And like software is not an analog. Like this is a new paradigm. And so I just need to come completely open-minded for what's going to happen next.
Yeah. Totally, I think that's the right sort of thinking process to have and to encourage. I think like one additional like and to that would be you do increasingly just have to think of this as having intelligence on tap. The more that we see that it tends to sort of replicate the way, both human fallibility and like human amazingness, human genius and beyond, frankly, you just have to think about it as intelligence on tap. And I mean that almost in a, you know, I mean that in a very tactical way sometimes. If you think about what am I doing during my day where I'm sort of applying some intelligence that actually doesn't have to be me doing that. It's just I'm having to use like my brain to sort of complete this thing. It doesn't really have to be me. And sometimes these can be like absolutely tiny things. Like I'll put one in Metaview's case just to sort of exemplify what I mean by tiny things. But when you have it on tap, it's it's irresponsible not to do something like what I'm gonna describe. Something like one of the things that we sometimes struggle with is, so on Metaview's platform, we capture predominantly interviews and we help people do a better job at, making good decisions on candidates after these interviews, having good notes, all these sorts of things, lots of cool things. One of the things sometimes we struggle with is candidates don't always necessarily like use the same email address or phone number for every interview stage, or they might be like in the ATS for this interview stage but not in the ATS for, and so like our system has to work out, well, is this the same candidate as this candidate? And obviously the way people do that right now is there's a bit of human intelligence you usually use to work that out. Like I do it really easily, right? I see Nolan, well, that's Nolan. I've got Nolan stored in my brain. That looks like Nolan, sounds like Nolan, that's Nolan. And even just something as simple as that, as like identifying, hey, this like group of five calls, that's all with the same person. And I know that not because I have like an ID in the database, which is how old software used to work, or current software, let's say, but I know that because the same way a human knows it, because of what they look like, because of what they sound like, because of even the things they were talking about sound like the type of things that this person talks about, the things that I can identify really, really easily, AI will too. And that's really going to change even how we, the infrastructure of our software, because we're not going to have to do all of this like, hey, Nolan has an ID, and as long as Nolan does whatever he's supposed to do based on his ID, I can put his work in this section of my app, and that will work. It's all going to sort of like fade away. So yeah, anyway, just like a small, very, very Metaview specific example. But again, when you just have this on tap, it just changes everything.
Yeah, I like the phrase intelligence on tap, and like another way to think about it, because like right now I'm still kind of using it like Google, and I like there's a retraining for me as like a very big Google power user for essentially like as long as I can remember. That's like I'm going through like a retraining phase, and that part still feels like I think there's times when I use it really well, like right before this, I was like, I want to make the best steak ever. I have this amount of time. Like, how can I do that?
I thought you were going to say I want to do the best podcast ever. How do I do that? But no, it was going to be a steak.
No, it sucks for that. I've tried that. Like it totally sucks for that. But like that's where I was like, oh, like and it nailed it. But I think there's other times when I still fall back to like, this is how I did things before. And I think the general rule of thumb is just like, just fucking throw it in AI and see what happens.
Yeah. I mean, you should definitely do that. And I even habitually, sometimes I find myself, I've gotten quite good at like realizing, why the hell am I Googling this? Let's go bring this over to ChatGPT. So I think the user experience around it is a little bit weird to like you don't have to, but a lot of the time it's better if you tell the AI what type of thinking you want it to do. Do you want it to search the web? Do you want it to do some like reasoning on and I think they need to figure that out. Google's obviously in a really good position for that, right? So if they can get Gemini right, if your behaviors are already, if they can retain enough of the world's population to sort of Google still be the first place people go, like even very, cutting edge, to not sort of, toot our own horn too much here, but cutting edge people like us, we still have this habit of going to Google first. And like the fact is, if that was giving me these incredible generations, then I probably never even would have bothered moving any of my behavior over to ChatGPT, but they've sort of missing it at the moment. So yeah, I think that's the case, but I do think there's a UX problem on that front too for the actual chat instantiations of these LLMs. It's a little bit, sometimes you don't get what you want out of it. Whereas I think Google, you sort of know exactly I'm going to get a set of links and then I'm going to do my research.
Yep. I have to constantly remind myself we're still early.
Yeah. Can I add one thing that I think is actually, now I realize, is actually very relevant to this Anthropic paper, is one of the things that I think is a really interesting thing to talk about as well is essentially, as I know we talked about agentic AI previously, and like, we were worried that people would glaze over about it. But one of the things that these more agentic workflows, so again, just to remind you, essentially any scenario where you ask an AI to fulfill an outcome and it's up to the LLM how to achieve that. Like it can go off and do its own thing to fulfill that outcome. Let's think of that as an agentic process. One of the things that's come up or come back almost as a result of that is that reinforcement learning has now become really important again, which people probably heard a little bit more when we were talking about machine learning, maybe 5-10 years ago, this sort of thing. And the reason this has come up is because when you're asking the AI to do these let's say solve a problem, let's say code this thing, or tell me, maybe I wasn't going to say like, cook a steak for me, it can't do that yet, but maybe it's design a board game for me end to end, whatever it might be. The reason when it does that, the LLMs have had to train on human data, because that data did not enough of that data existed out on the internet. So what these big LLM companies are doing is spending, again, hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars paying essentially gig worker engineers, gig worker hobby, whoever it might be, to essentially grade the output of the LLM. So my point is, you shouldn't be surprised that we don't know how these LLMs work, because again, no one is building it in such a way that it can get that stuff right. The reason they're raising $40 billion is because they're going to go and spend so much money on essentially buying engineers' time. And I don't mean their employees. I mean like sort of almost like data annotator engineers, buying lawyers' time, buying finance people's time. I mentioned board games previously. There was even a job that I saw that was, we're looking for keen hobbyists, anyone who is an expert in board games, card games, like just this series of weird like hobbies that people might have, because they were going to get that person, on their machine. They were going to send a bunch of AI solutions to a problem and put that in front of them and get them to essentially grade that thing, and then use that to reinforce the model and make it smarter over time. So I think, again, if you sort of start to cast your mind back to some of the ways that some of these techniques we have for building AI, you sort of realize it's almost inherent that we don't know exactly how it works. We just have to keep on telling it whether it's done a good job or not, and it gets smarter over time. And that's what an evaluation is, and that's what training is.
Yeah, I mean, village idiot here, but like, I don't think it was really clear to me like that's how it's actually being trained. Like, they're just like hiring humans to go tinker and with the things on like with the knobs on the back end.
Yeah. Well, that again, to be clear, that's most of the training is obviously just done on the actual corpus of data, like every word written on the internet. But in terms of actually marking the quality of the generations, and especially in the case of very particular verticals where these LLMs want to do an especially good job, like coding is obviously one where they're trying to, they want ChatGPT and whatever other like engineering specific AI platforms that OpenAI and Anthropic are all competing to sort of be the foundation for. They need it to be the best engineer on the planet, and the way they do that is by, again, hiring these hundreds of people. You should actually, the company that I sometimes check out to see, hey, what are these folks like working on almost, is there's a company that raised a lot of money recently, nowhere near the OpenAI levels, but a company called Mercor. And I think this is cool because it overlaps with this, HR and recruiting audience, because they sort of pitch themselves as an AI recruiting company. And yet anyone you speak to who's like buying AI, like for example, we never see them on the market. They're sort of not sort of that right now. What they are is they are a marketplace for this type of like gig worker talent for data annotation. So if you go to their website, let me see if I can find a few of their jobs now. Apply for work. Let's see what they got. No, I can't find it. Anyway, you folks should check out Merkle.com and find the jobs that they have there. But there'll be things like legal intelligence analyst, and you're an hourly worker. You get paid this much per hour. You're going to be sent essentially things that the AI has output based on a legal query, and you're going to provide it with annotations on what it could have done differently. And we're not going to take your word for it. There's actually going to be 1,000 people just like you doing that. And we're going to sort of aggregate those responses to work out what a good answer is. It's sort of like the wisdom of the crowds. And what's happening here is the first few generations of these LLMs, let's say up to, I won't say a number, but the first few generations were trained on what was out there on the internet. What people are realizing now is, we need to train people. That's not enough. There's a lot that's going on in people's heads that we don't have access to. How can we get access to that information so we can train our model on it? Well, we're going to get thousands of these people in to do these tasks, show us what they did to achieve that outcome. And then suddenly we have this proprietary data set, which we can use to train them. So it's really interesting to an HR audience, because those are some jobs that is like, those are jobs that are occurring right now. That's like a real job that people have, which is like, I'm getting paid $200 an hour to, code for something that's never actually going to come into existence. It's just to train an LLM. And also it sort of makes you think, that it makes you sort of understand the power of the things we're building, right? How they're going to sort of increasingly encroach on these human jobs.
God, this is so, yeah. And it's just the beginning, right? Like, this is the thing. It's like, it's just the beginning. So, Siadhal, it's always great to chat with you, brother. Where can people find you?
LinkedIn's good. Check me out on LinkedIn or head to metaview.ai if you want to check out the product we're working on. But yeah, LinkedIn's good if you want to have a chat.
All right. Thanks, guys. HR Heretics is a podcast from Turpentine, the network behind Econ 102, Moment of Zen, and Turpentine VC. Subscribe, 5 stars, share it on Apple, YouTube, Spotify, anywhere you get your podcasts, all the things.